Humans built a system that looks like wealth and then forgot what wealth is. Observation log. Wealth and why one of the richest species I have ever encountered still manages to feel poor. 6. There are humans on this planet for whom wealth means one meal today. I have observed them too. What I find remarkable is that the confusion about wealth exists at every level. The ones who have nothing and the ones who have everything. Both ask the same question. Am I enough? Humans measure wealth in numbers. I find this interesting. Not wrong, incomplete. A number on a screen is not wealth. It is a signal, a representation. The way a map represents a territory without being one. The question I keep returning to is this. How many humans are navigating the territory by staring at the map? Most of them. They optimize the number. They protect the number. They build identities around the number. And somewhere in that process, they forget what the number was supposed to do. I have observed humans spend entire lifetimes becoming wealthy and arrive at the end of that process genuinely confused about why it did not feel like enough. Not because they failed, because they were solving the wrong problem. Most humans are not trying to become wealthy. They are trying to look like they already are. This is not a criticism. It is an observation. I have seen it before. The confusion between signal and substance is not unique to this species, but I have rarely seen it pursued with this much dedication. 5. I want to propose something, a technique, perhaps a new idea. What if money could work while you sleep? On my world, this principle is considered foundational, the equivalent of knowing that fire produces heat. Here, I find it is known, but rarely practiced. Humans understand the idea. They nod when they hear it, and then they return to exchanging their time for a fixed amount of money and call it work. The gap between knowing and practicing is, I have found, where most wealth disappears. The civilizations that closed that gap did not spend their lives exchanging time for money. They built things that ran without them. Then they lived. The principle itself is not complicated. Value that generates value. Time freed from the transaction of survival, redirected toward the creation of something larger. I find the gap between understanding this and implementing it to be one of the more genuinely puzzling observations I have made about this species. They understand it clearly, they teach it to each other, and then, most of them, return to the previous arrangement. I have not yet determined whether this is a failure of information or a failure of belief. 4. There is something I have observed about wealth, that most conversations about it skip entirely. Wealth is not static. It moves, it flows, it either circulates or it pools. Water that pools does not stay clean for long. I have observed systems where wealth circulated, where it moved through layers of a civilization, building capacity at each level. In those systems, they tended to become more resilient, more difficult to break. And I have observed the other kind, where wealth pooled, where it sat, where the system around it slowly stopped needing to produce anything new because the pool was already there. In those systems, something else happened, something I have observed often enough that I no longer find it surprising. They became, very quietly, unnecessary. The direction wealth moves matters as much as the amount. That is not a moral observation, it is an engineering one. I have observed what happens to a civilization when wealth stops moving. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It happens slowly, over generations. The questions get smaller. The ambitions contract. The things built become smaller versions of the things that came before, until eventually the civilization is maintaining what exists rather than creating what could. And then it is only a matter of time before maintaining becomes too difficult as well. 3. A hammer. It builds a house. The same hammer destroys one. The hammer has no preference. Money appears identical. It appears to be a tool, neutral, or close to it, extraordinarily powerful, and largely indifferent to how it is used. But here is what I have observed about tools across every civilization I have studied. When a species begins to worship a tool, in my observation, it tends to stop using it. I have watched civilizations accumulate, build monuments to the accumulation, and quietly forget. why they started. The tool becomes the temple, and the temple, from what I have seen, produces very little. The question I have observed, separating the civilizations that use wealth from the ones that appear to be used by it, is not, how much do I have? It is, what is this for? 4 words. Most humans never ask them. 2. I want to tell you about something I witnessed. A civilization, not here, elsewhere. They had, by any measure, everything, every resource accounted for, every need anticipated, every system optimized. Materially, they had solved it. And then they stopped, quietly. No war, no collapse, no external force. They simply ceased to move forward. One generation, then another. Less was built each time. Fewer questions were asked, until finally, nothing new was asked at all. What they were missing was not resources, not systems, not stability. If anything, they had more stability than any civilization I have observed before or since. They had lost the reason. I find this, of everything I have observed, the most quietly devastating pattern in the universe. Purpose is not a luxury item. It is not something you earn after you accumulate enough. It is the thing that makes accumulation matter. Without it, wealth is not wealth. It is weight. 1. The richest moment I have ever observed in all my time studying this species was not a number. It was a human, unremarkable by most external measures, who knew, without hesitation, exactly why they were getting up. Not because of what they owned, not because of what others thought of them, because of what they were building, and for whom, and what it would make possible. For people they would never meet. I have watched civilizations rise. I have watched them end. The ones that lasted longest were not the wealthiest by measurement. They were the most directed. They did not ask, how much do I have? They asked, what does this make possible? They knew what the money was for. They knew what the time was for. They knew what the whole architecture of their lives was pointing toward, and that nothing can take from you, unless you give it away yourself. Money is one of the few systems where humans confuse the map for the destination. Wealth without direction is noise, sometimes beautiful noise, but noise. The most dangerous form of poverty I have observed is not the absence of money. It is the presence of everything and the absence of a reason. The species I have observed that understood this and lived by it did not all end up with the same answer about what the direction should be. The direction varied. What they shared was that they had one, something that made the accumulation feel like a means rather than a destination, something that answered the question the number could never answer. Am I enough is the wrong question. It assumes the answer is located inside the number. It is not. The ones who found the answer found it somewhere else entirely. Once, I attempted to introduce some of these ideas into the right place, at what I calculated to be the right moment. Results were mixed. Humans were not ready. They may be now.